In his preface, Robert Bolt addresses the apparent contradiction between Thomas More's upright moral sense and his periodic attempts to find legal and moral loopholes. Moore strongly opposes Henry's divorce, yet he hopes to avoid rather than speak out against the oath of supremacy. Moore explains his actions when he says to Will Roper, "God's my God. But I find him rather too subtle." Moore respects God's law above all else, but he also does not pretend to understand it. Therefore, he sees man's law as the best available guide to action, even if it occasionally contradicts God's law or lets some evildoers off the hook. In his approach to moral action, Moore is thoroughly pragmatic, but not, like Cromwell or Rich, at the expense of his beliefs. If Moore sometimes seems hypocritical, it is because he is trying to balance his respect for the law and society with his deep-rooted sense of self. He obeys the law fully, and, in the end, the prosecution has to come up with false charges to execute him. Moore's pragmatic maneuvering through society contrasts with what Moore calls Roper's seagoing principles. Roper follows ideals instead of his conscience or the law, and Moore argues that attempting to navigate high-minded ideals is akin to being lost at sea. Roper switches willy-nilly from Catholicism to Lutheranism and back again, each time utterly convinced of his own righteousness. Bolt implies that because we cannot comprehend the moral alignment of the universe, much less wrap it up in a tidy theory, we should focus our energy on improving ourselves and our society. A Man for All Seasons focuses on the rise of Richard Rich as much as it follows the fall of Sir Thomas More. As Moore's steadfast selfhood earns him a spot on the chopping block, Rich acquires more and more wealth and greater status by selling out his friend and his own moral principles. Although Rich at first bemoans his loss of innocence, by the end of the play he has no qualms about perjuring himself in exchange for a high-ranking position. In Act 1, Scene 8, Rich gives Cromwell information about the silver cup in exchange for a job. Rich laments that he has lost his innocence, and the scene suggests that Rich has sold his soul to the devil. Cromwell himself evokes the devil as he craftily cajoles Rich into selling out before cramming Rich's hand into a candle flame. Although Act 1, Scene 8 recalls many cautionary religious tales about the seductive powers of the devil, Bolt does not depict Rich's corruption to warn us that people like Rich go to hell. Rather, Rich's corruption, set against Moore's hard and fast sense of self, shows the damage Rich has done to his own life. Rich has sacrificed the goodness of his own self, which the play argues is the only thing for which life is worth living. Through its depiction of Moore's personal relationships, the play examines the extent to which one can be true to oneself and a good friend to others. Above all, Moore looks inwardly for his strength and comfort. He appears to be more of a teacher than a friend or a lover. He relies on his own conscience as his guide, and through tests and through the example he sets, he attempts to teach others to do the same. However, Moore's instructive instinct results in relationships that are not overtly heartfelt. One could also argue that Moore shows his friendship and love by teaching others. The play shows that Moore's self-reliance is not completely incompatible with friendship and love. In Moore's conversations with Norfolk and Alice, he shows that he truly cares about them as his friend and wife, respectively. Moore tells Norfolk to cease knowing him, but Moore argues that he gives his instruction because of the friendship the two men share. He tells his wife that he could not die peacefully if he knew that she was still confused about why he remains silent and does not give in to King Henry. Moore also tells Matthew that he will miss him. Throughout the play, the characters with ties to the court participate in confused and misinterpreted exchanges of dialogue. These exchanges both satirize the court and portray the way corrupt morals lead to corrupt and ambiguous speech. In Cromwell's exchange with the innkeeper, Cromwell humorously states that he can never be quite sure whether he's duping or being duped when he interacts with such a tactful person. Cromwell has a similar exchange with Rich, in which he tries to assess just how trustworthy and how bribable Rich might be. Shapies wrongly assumes that Moore's straightforward answers are double talk and gives him a knowing wink that is completely out of place. Historically, Moore was as witty as he was saintly. Much to Alice's chagrin, Moore spends most of his time making light of the dangerous situations he encounters. In the play, Moore's wit establishes his humanity. In Act 1, Scene 7, Moore insists that man is born to serve God wittily. By this, he means that man must cleverly escape death for as long as he legitimately and lawfully can, but the statement also emphasizes the importance of a sense of humor. Moore is remarkable as much for his silence as for his statements. He maintains that if he does not speak his opinion concerning his disapproval of the king's intention to divorce his wife, then, according to the Bible, his silence will connote consent, not assent. Moore uses silence to his advantage, refusing to incriminate himself in a way that resembles invoking the Fifth Amendment in a United States court of law. Moore also protects his family from legal persecution by staying silent about his opinions in their presence. Moore is silent in other ways as well. He disparages people, like Roper, who clamor at all times about ideals. Moore prefers to listen to the voice within, his conscience. He does not criticize Norfolk until he is sure that Norfolk needs to be criticized and enraged. At the trial, Cromwell's argument to the jury equates Moore's silence with complicity in a crime. Cromwell's claim is ironic, for the play shows how many other characters, primarily those played by the common man, remain silent when they could tell more about the plot against him. Guilt receives much attention in the play, particularly in the characters of Rich, Norfolk, the jailer, Matthew, and even in Moore himself. Bolt shows how Rich constantly suffers under his own sense of guilt and yet cannot resist the temptation to improve his own prospects at the expense of others and his own conscience. When he is Matthew, the common man noticeably feels guilt on some level when Moore shows affection for him. As the jailer, the common man has a conscious understanding of his guilt and assuages his guilty conscience by convincing himself that it would be futile to set Moore free. Norfolk is obviously racked with a sense of guilt when he tells Moore of Cromwell's plot and his own association with it. Moore himself shows an inkling of guilt when he realizes that he might have to go to the chopping block with his family, still unaware of why he acts the way he does.